My SIL threw a fit when I refused to pay for her bachelorette trip, and now she's blaming me for her fiancé leaving and the wedding being cancelled. My sister-in-law, Stephie, 26F, and I share a lot of history because we attended high school together. Back then she was a major bully, and I happened to be one of her favorite targets. Why not? I was a huge nerd in high school, and my appearance didn't help. I was quite tiny and wore braces, making me the stereotypical nerdy girl in a teenage high school movie. Instead of glasses, I wore braces, and my transformation did not occur until I was in college. Fortunately, I look considerably better now, having gained some weight and had my braces removed before beginning college. Not that there was anything wrong with my appearance before, but now I'm less likely to be bullied, which is all that matters. I met my spouse Andy at a college party a few years ago, when I was in my third year. He was 3 years older than me and previously worked as a DJ on the side. I got pretty drunk at that party, and because my apartment was so far away and no one else was accessible, he offered to bring me back. He was kind enough to drive me home and even wrote his phone number on the back of my hand, saying I could call him if I wanted because he liked me. The next morning, I awoke with a severe hangover, but knew I had met someone wonderful. I called him, asked him out for a date, and that was all. We got along incredibly well on that first date, and I felt I'd found the one. But there was one issue: his sister. On our first date, we discussed our families, and Andy stated that he has a sister named Stephie. I joked about having a high school bully with the same name, but he looked at me seriously and said it could have been his sister, who had some behavioral issues back then. When he informed me the name of her high school, we discovered that his sister was my high school bully. It felt embarrassing, but I didn't let it interfere with our time together. I told him it wasn't a huge thing because I preferred him over his sister, and he agreed. After 3 months of dating, we decided to introduce each other's families. While it was reasonably easy for me to introduce him to my family, he found it tough and unpleasant because he was aware that his sister and I did not get along well. I was anxious the first time I had supper with his family, mostly because of Stephie. But it didn't go that terrible. His parents were really warm and friendly to me, and Stephie was cold and aloof, but it was still better than how she treated me in high school. I preferred this new version of her since it was much easier to deal with. She didn't say anything to me and kept our interaction to a minimum, which I viewed as a victory because it meant we could simply ignore one another and move on. I consider myself fortunate because this has been our relationship for the past few years. I haven't had much interaction with her, and she has never showed a desire in becoming friends with me. Even after Andy and I married 2 years ago, she only spoke to me as much as was necessary. So I'd say Stephie and I aren't particularly close, and we both enjoy it this way. After the way she treated me in high school, I doubt I'd want to be friends with her. Andy isn't bothered by this because he knows how harsh his sister can be. He doesn't mind that the two of us don't talk, and he understands that I haven't forgiven her for the way she devastated my high school experience because she has never expressed regret. You can't forgive someone who doesn't even apologize, and Andy understands that. He and Stephie have a regular sibling relationship, which I'm fine with because I know he does not perceive Stephie in the same way that I do. It's also been a long time since high school, and I don't want to urge my husband not to communicate with his sister or create unnecessary drama. She and I are now civil, and that is all that matters. Everything is okay in the family. I was surprised when Stephie contacted me a few weeks ago and asked if I wanted to join her on her bachelorette trip to the Greek islands. She didn't simply ask me over the phone, she invited me over to lunch. I was skeptical at first, but Andy urged me to try it, so I went. During lunch, she invited me to join the excursion. She was pleasantly kind to me, and she even apologized for how she treated me in high school. Instead of ignoring our shared history, Stephie addressed it for the first time. I was surprised since I hadn't expected her to admit to the constant bullying. When it eventually happened, I didn't know how to react. She apologized for how she had treated me, admitting she was just being a brat, and said she discovered her error too late. She also claimed that she had never brought it up, even after I began dating her brother, because she was uncomfortable confronting the past and didn't know how to face me after everything she had put me through. While discussing all of this, she even shed some tears, making it appear extremely sincere. As the naive emotional person that I am, I fell for it. I told her that I had forgiven her and that everything was in the past because I no longer had any issues with her. We were all adults, so we could deal with it the way we were supposed to, enjoy a few drinks together and forget about it. She appeared pleased with this, and we ended the lunch on a positive tone. She invited me to accompany her and her pals on their bachelorette vacation to the Greek islands because she wanted to make up for lost time and make me feel like a friend. Initially, I was apprehensive to agree, but she persuaded me. I eventually accepted since I believed it would be a nice experience and could help me develop a friendship with Stephie. I was tired of the tension we felt any time we were in the same room. After much debate, I agreed. I wanted to move on from the past and give our relationship a new start, and I saw no better way to do it than to go on a trip and let our hair down. That was a few weeks ago. Stephie and I have been in touch since then. She was being married next month, and we were due to leave for the vacation at the start of this week. However, the trip was cancelled due to a prank she played at the airport. She felt she could fool me into paying for the entire trip by breaking the news to me at the last minute, figuring I wouldn't cancel. She had no idea how easy it was for me to walk away, unlike her. I didn't care what her friends or she thought of me. We arrived at the airport approximately an hour before our aircraft was due to depart. We were all speaking when Stephie suggested we go get coffee, so I joined her. At the counter, she casually said, "Oh, by the way, I hope all your cards work internationally, because otherwise, you'll have a hard time paying for things." I informed her I was carrying cash for souvenirs and little purchases, but she explained that she meant hotel rooms, food, and even aircraft tickets, and that I would have to reimburse her for everything. I was really caught off surprise. We had never talked about this before, and half an hour before our trip was hardly the time to bring it up. She kept speaking in a casual tone, so I questioned if she expected me to pay for myself during the vacation. To my surprise, she said, "Not only for yourself, but for everyone on the trip, including my friends and me. I assumed you were going to sponsor the entire event, which is why I chose such an expensive location. I know you can afford it. Will that be a problem?" I still recall her exact words and can hear her tone in my brain, as if it were the most apparent thing in the world. But we hadn't talked about it, and I had never agreed to something like that. I questioned whether she was serious, and she admitted that she had expected me to finance the entire trip. She claimed if I didn't, she'd think I was stingy and selfish because I had the highest salary she knew. She couldn't think of any reason why I would say no. But I could think of several reasons, beginning with the fact that I never agreed to this. She did not even ask if I was comfortable with it. Yes, I did earn more than most others she knew because I am the vice president of a relatively large corporation. However, that did not obligate me to support her travel. We weren't there yet, especially since we were still developing our connection. And I was certainly not going to consider paying for a vacation for a group of people I didn't even know. More importantly, it was my money and my decision. She could call me a miser or a stingy person, but it wouldn't matter to me since I wasn't going to spend a lot of money on a vacation I didn't even plan and on people I didn't know or care about. After a while of standing there while she grabbed her coffee, I decided to stroll back to where everyone else was sitting, gather my belongings, and leave. This was silly, and I didn't want to cause a commotion in a public place, so I left quietly. Stephie raced after me with her coffee, while her pals tried to figure out what was wrong, but I didn't believe it was necessary to explain anything to them. I just walked out of the airport, hopped into the first cab I saw, and went before they could find me. As soon as I got into the cab, I decided to block Stephie so she couldn't call me and bother me further. The next thing I did was phone Andy and tell him what had happened. I felt awful for him since he had been so happy that his sister and I were finally getting along. I expected this trip to help our relationship, but we were both mistaken. When I called him and informed him what Stephie had tried to do, he was much more furious than I was. He said that was inappropriate behavior and that he would call his parents right away to discuss it. I believe he was more disappointed with his sister than I was, because I knew she was a bad person and wasn't surprised by what had transpired. Andy and his parents, on the other hand, had undoubtedly anticipated more from her, and she had truly disappointed them. I believe that's what really messed things up for her after that, because as they found out what she was up to, they were all furious. Andy didn't say anything to her directly, but I could see he wasn't going to let this go since it was demeaning to me, and he was disappointed in his sister. When I returned home from the airport, Dad informed me I didn't need to speak with Stephie anymore. Not that I needed to be informed twice, I didn't want anything to do with her in the first place. I didn't hear from anyone in his family for the rest of the day, including his parents, but I knew Andy was on the phone with them all day. I elected not to discuss it with anyone because tempers were running hot. I knew everyone was already unhappy, and I didn't want to exacerbate it. I just stayed silent and waited for the storm to pass. 2 days passed with nothing happening, but I did chat with my in-laws. They apologized for how Stephie had treated me. I told them that it was no big issue because it was not their fault. I saw how wonderfully they had reared their son, so I knew their parenting was not the issue. Stephie was solely responsible for how she turned out. Andy and I got back to normal quite shortly after that. I didn't ask him about the implications of Stephie's conduct since I wasn't interested in them. All I knew was that I wouldn't have to engage with her anymore, which was plenty for me. But then, 2 days after the incident, I learned that the wedding had been cancelled and her fiancé had left her. That was the indirect result of what she had done to me. When Andy and I returned home from work that day, he informed me that Stephie was blaming our family for her breakup with her fiancé. I wasn't sure how that was even logical, given that we hadn't spoken to her since the airport incident. Apparently, this all happened because, after Andy told his parents what Stephie had tried to pull at the airport, they called her and asked her to apologize to me. However, Stephie didn't believe she had done anything wrong. Instead, she began telling her parents that I was harsh and stingy, and she was relieved I had left. This irritated her parents, who informed her that they would no longer be paying for the wedding and that she needed to find someone else to fund her lavish occasion. Stephie attempted to seem unconcerned, but it was going to be difficult for her to cover all of the wedding expenses on her own because she had just resigned her job and started her own business a few months ago, which had yet to break even. It was not feasible to pay for anything herself. Despite knowing this, she refused to apologize or accept responsibility for her mistakes. The wedding was only a few weeks away, so this was becoming an urgency for her. According to Andy, after speaking with her parents, Stephie informed her fiancé that her parents would no longer be funding the wedding expenses and that she expected him to take over. This sparked a massive dispute between them because it was clearly unfair for her to drop this on him with only a few weeks till the wedding. That fight eventually led to the cancellation of the wedding. After Andy told me the whole story, I asked him how he knew everything. He added that following the altercation with her fiancé, Stephie arrived at their parents' house and argued with them as well. She had blamed both them and me for what had occurred. She largely blamed me, which I thought was unfair given that I had nothing to do with the incident. Stephie stated that she had to cancel her trip with her pals because I refused to pay for it. She now believed she had to cancel her entire wedding and that her fiancé would most likely end their relationship. I strongly disagree with the vacation situation, because there was never any talk about me paying for it. It was absurd of her to anticipate that. However, I feel horrible that her wedding was cancelled. I've been feeling guilty about complaining to my husband and becoming so agitated over the situation. I guess I'm just sad for her because I know she was looking forward to getting married. Honestly, I'm looking for some reassurance. Is it my fault for whining to my husband about my sister-in-law expecting me to support her bachelorette trip for all of her pals at the airport? Update. First and foremost, thank you so much for informing me that I am not at blame here. I guess I needed to hear that. I was feeling bad about everything, and it didn't help that Stephie had been posting depressing things about being betrayed and such. It's been 5 days since the airport incident, and even though I've banned her everywhere, I know she's been posting bizarre sad phrases to get attention. When someone questions her about it, she tells them her side of the story while claiming to be the victim. Any sorrow I felt over her wedding being postponed has vanished because, plainly, she will stop at nothing to make me look like the villain in her story. I don't have to feel awful for her. She has even gone so far as to tell people that, while she anticipated me to stab her in the back, she didn't believe her brother would ever promote or tolerate something like this, but she was plainly mistaken, and her brother couldn't care less about her feelings. Again, I feel compelled to highlight that she had never asked me if I was comfortable or willing to cover the costs of the trip for her and her friends. The fact that she had to cancel at the last minute and return from the airport was totally her responsibility. According to her version of the tale, we had discussed it several times, but I flipped out at the airport, threw a fuss and left, which she considered a major slap in the face. She states that she and her friends had to return home without a trip, which was quite humiliating. It's infuriating how she's been spreading lies about me. However, I'm relieved that most of the relatives she's been saying this to have contacted me, as it seems out of character for me. I was able to clear the air and explain my side of the situation. Most people believe me, so whatever she's doing isn't working. She's coming across as a complete liar and moron. Andy told me he wanted to speak with her and tell her she couldn't keep lying about us, but I assured him there was no need. What she's doing is backfiring, and instead of harming our reputation, she's injuring herself. We can simply let her carry on. Update 2. It's been about 2 weeks since we learned that Stephie was no longer getting married. She had been complaining about us to all of her relatives, but it didn't work because most of them didn't believe her and turned to me for proof. I told them the truth, and within a few days, almost everyone knew what had transpired. She realized there was no use in attempting to make us appear terrible anymore, so she gave up. We assumed that was the end of the story, but evidently not. She has recently moved in with her parents because she and her fiancé broke up and she has nowhere else to go. Her fiancé, a good guy, had offered to let her keep the apartment while he moved out, but she couldn't afford the rent on her own, so she decided to move back in with her parents. Andy and I find it ironic. She had so much to say when her parents told her they wouldn't be supporting her wedding, pretending she had it all under control. But now her life is crumbling apart, and her parents are the only people she can turn to. My in-laws, being the nice people they are, took her in despite her bad behavior. But now that she's living with them, you'd think she'd have the common sense to stop talking negatively about me and Andy, especially in front of her parents, who are also Andy's parents. However, she is one of the most dumb persons I've ever met. Even after my in-laws made it clear that she was not permitted to badmouth us or behave as if we were the villains, she continued to do so in front of them. She was continually attempting to turn them against us, so my in-laws decided to inform her that she could either acknowledge her mistake and try to become a better person, or she would no longer be allowed to live with them. That, of course, irritated her, and she has now taken to emailing Andy every day, reminding him that I not only destroyed her bachelorette trip and wedding, but also damaged her life because her fiancé deserted her and her parents continue to support me. As if any of that were my fault. Andy has not blocked her yet because she is a family member, but she is on thin ice. A couple more texts insulting me, and I'm sure Andy will visit his parents' house to confront her in person. I believe she is only venting her feelings, but it is wrong. Update 3. We did it, I just couldn't handle it any longer. She was going too far, saying the worst things about me while messaging Andy, believing she could get away with it. Unfortunately for her, we are not particularly friendly. She had called me every name in the book, referred to me as jealous and insecure, and even said that I didn't look any better than I did in high school, which was a complete falsehood. She understands how sensitive I am about my appearance and makes it a point to pick on it whenever she can, which has gotten pretty obvious at this point. I also don't see why she thinks I'd be jealous of her, especially since my life is clearly better right now. She honestly has nothing to make me jealous or anxious about. Anyway, these were the types of things she had been texting Andy, attempting to irritate us, and she was successful. Earlier this evening, we went to my in-laws' house to address her because she needed to stop thinking she could say and do whatever she wanted without consequences. We had already spoken with Andy's parents, and they knew why we were there, so they didn't ask too many questions and simply allowed us in. Stephie was sitting in the living room and appeared shocked to see us. She had the nerve to ask her parents why we were there, as if we weren't supposed to be there. Her parents did not answer, so I took over the conversation. I told her she needed to learn to stop her mouth because I'd had enough of her bullshit and wouldn't put up with her constantly talking about me. I made it obvious that if she didn't stop talking about me to anyone, I'd make sure my side of the story became public as well, which would not be good for her. She quickly erupted, accusing me of blackmail and alleging her family had ambushed her. When we urged her to be quiet and simply apologize, she refused. Instead, she began packing her belongings and left within an hour, knowing she was no longer wanted and going to stay with a friend. I'm confident she'll be back in a few weeks because no friend will let her live rent-free for long. Given how much of a miser she is, I doubt she will pay when she can simply return to her parents and live for free. But for the time being, we are all free of her, and I must admit that I am much better off. I believe everyone would agree with me on that. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.